My name is Brian Young. I'm executive director here at Action Network and Action Builder. And joining me here is Martha Grant, who has been our lead on Action Builder and now our director of uh, um, cooperative development strategies. And we are going to talk about Action Builder and organizing for the next couple of days. But first, I'll give a little bit of background on who we are. Many of you know some of this, some of you know all of it, but we are coming up on our 10th birthday, actually, of the launch of Action Network. Back in 2013. The original start of the organization started a little bit earlier in 2012. We're really looking for a new way to build technology that really served the movement. And all of us come out of the movement. We're not tech people trying to sort of foist tech on the movement, really trying to look for a different way of building and something that really empowered the people in the movement, us, to build power. So the very first thing we built was a distributed activism tool, which was used on those Black Friday strikes and protests against Walmart back in 2012. So you remember that everybody could adopt a Walmart, adopt their local event, run their local event, have real freedom to build their own events, but within a collective framework that added up impact. And the result was the largest day in labor focused protest in decades. In that style of sort of distributed day of actions, the Women's March, which used our tools, March for Our Lives, Dakota Access Pipeline, and on, really launched there. And it was a really great example of technology not doing something, but empowering people to do things and to build power. Then in 2012, we really shifted from just doing some distributed campaign tools to really deepening our vision and thinking about what the movement needed overall. And that was the genesis of Action Network. Action Network was built in a cooperative development framework, which we'll talk about more in just a few minutes. And going from there, we built out a nonprofit technology effort that's really mission first, mission focused, and that mission is for building progressive power. And we really believe that creating technology to focus on the needs of what we do as a movement is just inherently different from start to finish from the incentives that go into building technology for profit and to really focus on transactions and building money where we're trying to build power. So that was our sort of North Star all the way through. And then people used Action Network, we grew. And because Action Network was so good at sort of distributed mobilization, people were trying to use it for organizing. And those are two different things. I don't have to tell everyone on this call this, but when I'm talking about it to others, really making the distinction between mobilization and organizing, how the two are both very important and feed off of each other, but they're very different things. And at first we actually, I was looking around for a tool to integrate Action Network into, so people could really use Action Network and then switch over to a good organizing tool, and found there really wasn't one. And really thought about why and thought about the needs of organizing. And I did organizing before I got into any of this work in a union context. And IBEW, for anyone out there, IBEW, an IBEW brother. I see a couple people on there. So and really thinking about the needs, the relationship building, everything that goes into organizing, and realizing that was just sort of anathema to a lot of the way Silicon Valley thinks about people and about technology. So realized that was something that we needed to build, and partnered with the AFL-CIO and significantly then People's Action also joined in a little bit at the beginning, but really focused on the needs of organizers. And that is when Martha joined the team to really build out Action Builder. And Martha, why don't you take just a couple minutes to take it from there and tell a little bit of story, and then we'll have a little conversation.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah. So I think many of you probably know, but Action Builder really got started almost exactly 6 years ago. So I joined the team from 5 years at AFSCME, where I had really struggled jerry-rigging solutions for our organizing department of how they could use technology effectively to help keep track of all the conversations they were having. And it was a challenge. We used Google Sheets, we used a bunch of different database tools, but nothing was actually built for the relational, conversational structure of organizing and tracking organizing data. So when I got wind that the AFL-CIO had partnered with Action Network to build a brand new organizing tool from the ground up, I was so excited. And then when I sat down and actually interviewed with Brian and Jason on the Action Network team, I got even more excited because, like Brian was saying, we don't build technology in a Silicon Valley style of, okay, this is what we're going to build. This is how we're going to build it. We build it in a cooperative development process. And tomorrow you can join Susie Grishpol, our amazing new product manager on Action Builder, to really do a deep dive into that cooperative development process and exactly how this process works. But the very short version is I joined the team and immediately had dozens of conversations with folks at a couple dozen different unions, AFL-CIO affiliated unions across the country, and really dragged this notebook around, or many notebooks ago, dragged a notebook around and took detailed notes of what do you want as an organizer? What do you really wish that you had that could help power your work? And really help you take your work to the next level too. Like, what do you need to see at a glance on your phone in the field? And what do you need to track? So we started those conversations over about 6 to 9 weeks. And then we presented a first version to a pool of representatives from, I think about 17 different affiliates were in the room for that first meeting and said, this is what we think we need to build. Are you good with it? And folks said yes. And we started to have cooperative development meetings on a quarterly basis and then a monthly basis, with several of the folks actually who are among the pool of attendees today. And those meetings allowed us to build Action Builder directly to meet the needs of our movement. So that cooperative development table actually said, yes, this is what we need. This is how we're going to build it. We need the button to be here and more prominent, and really build this tool in a very detail-oriented way for organizing, and to help nudge folks to organize in the most effective ways possible. So like standardized assessment scales across organizations. In the next session, I'll be kicking off our Action Builder deep dive, and we'll highlight some of the features and why they were built the way they were built and what that feedback was early on. And then Jen D'Agostino on our team, we actually stole her a little bit from the cooperative development table. She was a representative for AFT at that table for years and years, and we were lucky enough to be able to hire her earlier this year. We've got a lot of other exciting attendees coming and really highlighting the way that we have built this tool to allow organizations to scale their campaigns and to scale them in a distributed way, which is something that we see is really important. So the United Faculty of Florida is a great example of that. And then one of the things that we really wanted to see from the beginning is to see unions collaborate on organizing drives. And there were some amazing examples early on with the trades collaborating on campaigns. But one of the very coolest campaigns to happen in the last couple of years is the President's Organizing Initiative in Seattle. And we're lucky to have them joining us this afternoon at 2:30 Eastern on how they've used the tool collaboratively to have many unions working together to organize the stadiums in Seattle. The Climate Pledge Arena and T-Mobile Park were both organized through Action Builder in this cooperative way. And then I do want to make a quick note that we are super excited about the People's Action coming back on the development committee, and making sure that the tool works really effectively, not just for the labor movement, for the progressive movement as a whole. And so we also will have Redress joining us tomorrow to talk about the awesome work that they're doing to build a movement of local leaders. And we really do believe in that bottom-up organizing style that is, as Brian said, not transactional. It's really based on building up leaders to help guide our movement going forward in a distributed way. And I know you've got some awesome, some more things to talk about on that front, Brian.
Yeah, we can just talk about it a little bit more to sort of set the scene and to follow up on what you're just saying. Because the cooperative development process, we were trying to build a tool for organizing. And one of the things, as an organizer, having people tell me I should use technology in the past was always, I don't know, it was like a condescending sort of conversation about, sort of get with the program, use technology. But the technology was terrible for organizing because people, even well-meaning people would would think to themselves, what do people need, and then build that to their own vision. And the whole point about our cooperative development models, it doesn't work that way. We talk to organizers and we talk to the people using the tools. And there are so many different ways to organize and so many different sort of pathways to certain parts of it. But then there's commonalities that we all know on what to do. And what are those commonalities we build in? Where should we build in the flexibility to do what you want? And that is a there's a billion ways to do that. And we can only do that in partnership with the people using the tools. And, I mentioned before, and Martha mentioned there about, really building technology that wasn't transactional in the sense that, I mentioned that most of the technology in our society that Silicon Valley builds is transactionalizing the relationships between people. Social media is all about that, turning interactions between people into transactions that someone somewhere can monetize. And that's not a pathway to building trust. And, the central point of organizing is building trust between the organization and the group of people you're trying to organize and among those people. Because, a lot of the outcomes that we're trying to get to with organizing are difficult by sort of nature. And that's why organizing is hard. And that's why you need to build that trust. So, I really think it's really critical for thinking about how to sort of scale organizing is to build from the core of organizing. It's not to try to reinvent anything, but to use technology to do what organizing should do, building communities. And just the last thing, I know Martha and I have talked about this a lot because she worked a lot with Van and voter files. And if the voter file has been great for mobilizing people for elections, but it's still that way of looking at people as individuals. And you sort of build up a profile of them around data so that you can reach them with a message to get them to do something, which, we're trying to get them to do societally beneficial things like vote for Democrats, but it's still the same process as trying to get them to buy shoes or any other sort of marketing process, which is just different than trying to get people to talk to each other and to build a community together and to be able to build technology. To do that, we have to build technology in that. We have to build technology in a community. And the cooperative development process is that, building it in the community, and everyone, on, today and tomorrow is part of that community of thinking about how we do this going forward. And I think, and Martha, you can chime in here, like where we're trying to go is exciting and really trying to do this at scale so that we can get organizing happening everywhere.
Yeah, just to jump in on that too, something I want to go back to is I think that one of the reasons that Action Builder is so powerful and has been so helpful to so many organizers is that we actually took it on as an organizing project. So we built the trust in the cooperative development table space and really focused on building that deep trust. And that's not dissimilar from the type of trust that we're hoping that organizers can use Action Builder to keep track of all those trustful relationships and help other people build their own trustful networks in a really deliberate way, and not a short-term way either. That this is a tool that's meant to take you from your first conversations forever along through bargaining, through subsequent bargaining rounds, through leadership development, so that you can really build a very healthy and very deep ecosystem of leaders. And, when I think about where this tool could go in the future, I want to talk a little bit more too about how it's so cool what MLK Labor is doing, what these different organizations are doing in terms of building networks that are wider than just their pool of leaders, that are really thinking about, let's look at a whole community and how do we build power across this whole community. And don't get stuck into well, I'm going to only build in my little silo. I'm going to only build among people who are interested in this particular topic. But what does it look like to actually look at a place as a whole and build up the leadership networks necessary to really enact progressive change on a much bigger scale? And that's one of the many areas that I'm very excited about right now.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point because even going back to the sort of voter file sort of comment I made earlier, if we think about organizing as building leaders and building community and building trusting relationships within community, a leader that say, we're working with some state parties, a leader that gets developed in state parties is a natural leader in their workforce when they have workplace issues. So to me, it's all about building organizing leaders throughout the community. And that point, and I think the Seattle POI is a great example of that, working across unions. There's a lot that our friends at the AFL-CIO are looking at with the CTO and others in the South, with all the changes and all the the EV supply chain factories getting built in so many different places. There's a lot of opportunities, and there's a lot of opportunities. I have a kind of a general sort of theory that's not backed up by any real evidence, but it's a pet theory of mine that there's a lot of organizing talent out there, because a lot of people who are younger grew up with a visualization of the networks they were within, because they were interacting with their phones and social media all the time. So the younger, and we're going to hear from some of them around the Trader Joe's union tomorrow. There's just a huge amount of organizing talent. I see my sons, who are teens, just organizing all the time, in a really interesting way. Sometimes it crosses over into issue organizing. Sometimes they're just organizing. But that there's an openness to to unions that we haven't seen for decades. And I really feel like if we get at some of the stuff that Martha was just talking about really building power across communities and finding leaders wherever they show up and being able to activate them in other parts of their life, we can kind of take what has been a really interesting last couple of decades of mobilization in our movement and add just an incredible organizing component to it that can build power in ways that we haven't been able to for a very long time.
That is so exactly right. And I'm hoping that for all of you who are attending this kickoff session, that we're getting you excited about the rest of the sessions that are to come. And also, I hope that some of these ideas you'll take back to your own home turf and figure out, how can we really scale organizing, and what does it look like to build those networks and real deep networked power, even beyond your own union or beyond your own organization. I want to talk a little bit about logistics, if that's a good time for it, Brian.
Sure.
So you have your agenda doc. Jeff also dropped it in the chat. Jeff is going to be our technology person today, making sure everything goes smoothly. Big shout out to Jeff. We're going to be trying to wrap up our sessions at about 10 minutes before the next session. So there will be a Q&A portion at the end of each session, and then we'll be only taking a couple of questions before we give you a break between those sessions, so you can go get some water or a snack and then rejoin us on the Zoom. One other note is these will all be recorded. So we're going to be putting them all up on YouTube. We would love it if you would share those with your friends, colleagues who you think would love to hear the messages that we're sharing here, the stories that we're sharing here. And we're also going to be putting together a couple of videos of clips as well, so highlights of these sessions. But we're really excited about all of the conversations that are going to be happening over the course of today and tomorrow. About 6 hours of great conversation about how we can really build and scale our movement, and what it looks like to take the lessons from these campaigns and apply them in your own space. Any closing words before we close and move on to our first session, the Action Builder Deep Dive?
No, for me, just thanks to everyone for joining, and thanks. I recognize many names on the list as people who have been organizing with Action Builder, and thanks for all of your work. And just a final thing, most of the rest of the session is a lot more interactive. This was just a little chat while we get going. So be ready with your questions and to raise your hand. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you all.